So if you listen to the headlines, you think that you need way more than $2 million to retire. Susie Orman was on record saying that if you're retiring early, you need somewhere between $5 and $10 million to retire. And $2 million is absolutely nothing. And in today's video, we're going to be breaking down why that logic is completely wrong. We're going to be showing you why retirement is actually two numbers, not one number that you're calculating for. We'll go through a 20-year early retirement case study. And then on the tail end, I will give you some key insights and considerations that you should think about if you're retiring early or if you're in the middle of your retirement. Let's get into it. So, first thing is discussing why retirement isn't actually one number. So, most retirement conversations center around one lump sum number, some number that you have to hit, and then you withdraw 4% of that amount, and it covers all your expenses for the rest of your life. But this logic is just plain wrong. You're actually calculating for two separate numbers, a bridge and a gap. So that bridge number is from when you retire early to when you start drawing Social Security. That amount of money has to last you to when Social Security hits. It's bridging that time frame. And you can actually draw down on those funds all the way down to zero if your plan supports. And then the gap number is the income gap that you need to make up for in your expenses after you start drawing Social Security. Most retirees, Social Security makes up the majority of their income in retirement, and you really just need your portfolio to support any gap in income that's going to happen in retirement. So you're calculating for two numbers, a bridge number and a gap number. And when you break it down that way, it's a lot easier to retire early, and you'll see that you don't actually need more than $2 million. So let's get into the case study. So in this example, we're going to retire at age 50, and we plan to withdraw Social Security at age 70. If you wait to age 70, that's when you get the maximum benefit. So the earliest you can draw is 62, 67 is full retirement age for most people. But if you wait to age 70, you maximize the benefit. So we're going to go from age 50 to age 70. That's our bridge. And ideally, we want to have about $120,000 that we're withdrawing from our account every year. So we're actually going to target a number slightly above that to give room for market fluctuations. And at age 70, we expect the combined Social Security benefit between you and your spouse to be about $80,000. That's a high number, but if you're a high income earner and you have almost $2 million saved, it's probably not very far from the truth. So we actually established a very aggressive withdrawal rate from our $2 million portfolio that we're starting with. We're withdrawing 8% per year.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
You might question, why are we withdrawing 8% per year? And it's because we don't need the full $2 million to make it all the way to when we have to make up for that gap in retirement. We just need the $2 million to bridge us to our Social Security, and then whatever is left in the portfolio to make up for the gap. So we're actually going to withdraw at a higher rate because we don't need this balance to last the rest of our lives. We only need it to last about 20 years and have some left over to make up for the income gap. And this 8% withdrawal rate that we're going to do on this, it's key to understand that it's going to adjust with the account balance. So as the balance goes down, we're going to withdraw a little less. And as the balance goes up, you're going to withdraw a little more. And that is a very key insight into understanding why the portfolio was able to survive the market volatility that it went through. Now, we started in 2006. We went from 2006 to 2026. And that 20 years is filled with market events. But the most notable is the global financial crisis in 2008. That housing market crash that tanked the stock market almost 50% happens 2 years into our analysis. And if you look at it, our account drew down almost 49.7% in that time frame. And our account isn't doing anything special. We didn't try and hedge the risk at all. We're actually 100% S&P 500. Nothing fancy, no tricks, no games. We just invested in the S&P and let it ride for this 20 years. And you can see when 2008 happens, our account balance almost cuts in half. We get down to $1.16 million. One thing worth noting is that the account balance doesn't stay low. The balance grows out of that global financial crisis, and at the end of the 20 years, you actually finish with $3.27 million. So not only did our balance survive, it thrived. It actually grew, even though it almost cut in half within the first 3 years of us retiring. And our target was to get over $120,000 a year. And you can see that there's only about 2 years where we're actually below that target 120K that we're withdrawing from the account. And that's in 2008, where we withdrew $100,000, and in 2009, where we drew about $117,000. And the rest of the time, our withdrawals from our account were actually above that 120K. And by the time 2025 rolls around, we are significantly above 120K. We're withdrawing about $250,000 from this account, and it is still continuing to grow. And like I said, we did not hedge any risk with this account. We didn't use a 60-40 stock bond portfolio. We didn't put gold in there. We did nothing to hedge the risk here. If we had set up withdrawal guardrails, risk base, or Guyton Klinger, where we actually adjusted our spending when the market went down, we could have managed the sequence of returns a bit better in this portfolio, but we didn't do anything to actually manage the sequence of returns, and it still came out okay. So we got to age 70. How much money do we actually need to make up with in that gap from our portfolio? So if you wanted $120,000 a year, and then you expect to get $80K a year from Social Security, 120 minus 80, your portfolio only needs to make up for $40,000. So if we back down to a safe withdrawal rate of 4%, we're saying that a $1 million portfolio with a safe withdrawal rate of 4% could make up for that $40,000 gap. But it was worth noting that the end of our bridge analysis, we're actually at $3.2 million, almost 3 times higher than what we actually needed in our portfolio to cover that income gap through the rest of our retirement. So with that in mind, we could have actually either retired earlier, or we could have had less money in our account and still retired successfully. Now, this analysis, this framework for how we thought through retiring early at 50, it's one path. It's not guaranteed. We just looked at retiring right before the global financial crisis in 2008. If we had looked at the stagflation era in 1966 or right around the dot-com bubble in 2000, the analysis could have been significantly worse. But we also didn't do anything to manage the risk in the analysis by using a 60-40 portfolio, some sort of withdrawal guardrail plan or bucket plan. So just know that we assumed the maximum amount of risk, but we also didn't assume the absolute worst case timing to retire. The other assumption in this analysis is that all the money was in a pre-tax account. Most people, the majority of their retirement funds are in the pre-tax accounts, but ideally, you want to get a diversified mix of accounts that you can withdraw from, some savings, some taxable brokerage, some Roth, some pre-tax 401k, pre-tax traditional IRA type accounts. And if you have that mix, you can actually control what income that you have coming in retirement, actually manage those IRMA surcharges, manage how much of your Social Security benefit is taxable. And that's a very powerful thing to have. So what should you be thinking about in early retirement? And there's definitely a lot of things to consider. But the most significant here is that if this scenario were to play out for you, by the time you hit age 73, you're going to have very significant required minimum distributions from a taxable 401k or any taxable retirement account that you might have. And that money is going to be stacked on top of your Social Security benefit. So it's going to be forced into some of the highest tax brackets. The other thing is when you hit age 65, you're required to transition from whatever health care you have to Medicare. And Medicare has premiums associated with it. And if you make too much money in retirement, they actually hit you with something called IRMA. It's income-related monthly adjustment amounts. So you end up paying more in premiums than other people in retirement. So if you're able to control your income draw in retirement, you can avoid these IRMA surcharges, but the IRMA surcharges become significant. And if you have significant amounts of income coming in retirement, then more of your Social Security benefit is actually taxable. That's right, they will pull taxes on your Social Security benefit. Structuring an early retirement where almost all your funds are in a company 401k or a IRA, a traditional IRA that's pre-tax, you're going to end up paying a ton in taxes and surcharges. So early retirement, you want to prioritize doing Roth conversions, moving the money over from these high income tax brackets that you'll experience later in your life to the lower tax brackets you'll see in early retirement. You want to max out to that 12, 22, and potentially even the 24% tax brackets, any conversions that you can do. So you want to prioritize that in early retirement. The other thing people don't think about in early retirement or are really concerned about in early retirement is healthcare. So healthcare is one of the main sticking points of why people stick around with their employer, think they have to stay with their employer until age 55, 60. They are very concerned about healthcare costs. And if you leave your employer and you don't actually shop for an Affordable Care Act health plan, healthcare is very expensive. You have to go to COBRA, and COBRA, you are paying what your company would have paid, what you have to pay, and an additional administrative fee. So you're actually paying 102% of what the cost of the healthcare was for your employer. And on average, an individual on a monthly COBRA plan is paying between $600 and $750 a month. And if you're on a family plan, that's between $1,800 and $2,500 a month. But if you shop around for a Affordable Care Act plan for an individual, it's $456 to $661 a month. And for a family, it will vary by household, but it will be significantly cheaper. But what's interesting is that if you are able to control how much income you have coming in early retirement, you can actually be eligible for Affordable Care Act subsidies. And a subsidized Affordable Care Act plan is significantly cheaper than just paying for it in the open marketplace. You would only need to pay about $50 to $168 a month in healthcare premiums if you were an individual. And that's if you are below the income limits, which I'm going to put up on the screen here for you. You want to have something that you're retiring to, not just retiring away from your job. The month that you actually decide to retire early matters. You want to get any medical procedures done with the healthcare that you're on with your company. Consider any bonuses that you'd be eligible for if you stay through the first few months of the year. Determining whether you want to use your PTO time or save your PTO time for a lump sum payout when you leave. Consider bumping your 401k max contributions so you can max it out in the early part of the year and leave space for those Roth conversions. And then the other thing is considering transitioning in spring or summer. So when you leave, you have favorable weather. I mean, a lot of people, if they leave and then they're trapped in their house in late November, December, they're depressed. They're very sad. They're questioning why they decided to step away from work. They feel socially isolated. They can't participate in the activities that they necessarily wanted to participate in early retirement. But if you leave in spring, early summer, you have longer days, better weather, you can actually get out, socialize, and you feel a lot better about your decision to actually step away from employment. When that first year, you want to account for the fact that you still have money coming from your employer and you'll be drawing money from your whatever other portfolio source. And you got to do some math to add those two together to see what tax bracket you're going to fall in. You don't want to get hit with a massive tax bill the first year that you actually retire. Make sure that Affordable Care Act plan is lined up before you leave. And then most importantly, you need to determine the sequence of accounts that you're actually pulling money out of. So savings, you could have a taxable brokerage outside of your company 401k or outside of a traditional IRA. You could have deposited funds in a Roth account. So you can actually access all the money that you have put into a Roth without incurring that 10% early withdrawal penalty. But if you start withdrawing any of the gains, it is subject to that 10% early withdrawal penalty. And then for the 401k, a lot of people think that your money is locked away in your 401k plan and you don't have access to it. But there's a rule called the rule of 72T, which allows you to set up separate but equal payments. And you can access that money before you actually hit 59 and a half. So the way it works is they'll do a calculation, and then based on which method you use to calculate your separate but equal payments, the payments will continue for at least 5 years until you hit age 59 and a half. So you turn it on and you can't turn it off until at least 5 years or 59 and a half. And the one drawback from this is that if you retire early and 4 or 5 years into early retirement, you think, I actually want to go back to work. Well, these payments don't stop. They keep going and they're going to stack on top of any income that you're getting from your new job. And those two together are going to push you into a higher tax bracket. In the early retirement, I think one of the biggest benefits, and one that most people don't even discuss, is the ability to establish a health and wellness routine. So 75 to 80% of retirees at age 60 are living with one chronic health condition. So that's hypertension, diabetes, high cholesterol. And by age 65 plus, 79% of Americans are managing two chronic health conditions. So retiring early, it gives you an opportunity to establish very positive health habits, better diet, exercise, and kind of offset the potential of getting these chronic health conditions. In your early retirement, you have more functional years of retirement. And then the last thing in early retirement, in this bridge time frame of your retirement, updating your beneficiaries. A lot of people don't necessarily recognize, even if you have a will, if your beneficiary selections on your account say something else, they will override what your will says. So your will and your beneficiary selections have to match. Make sure those things are up to date on all your accounts. And then in the gap portion of retirement, once again, we're prioritizing getting those Roth conversions done up to age 73. Not everyone has to do Roth conversions. If your account balance is less than $1 million, less than about $800,000, you could probably get away without doing aggressive Roth conversions. But if you were dealing with the scenario we discussed here, you're significantly above that threshold, and you should really consider doing those Roth conversions to get that balance down. So less than $1 million, less than 800,000. You should evaluate what age you actually want to start drawing Social Security. And I actually did an entire video on the framework to think through this. It's called the LIFT framework. You're thinking about your life expectancy, your income gap, your family, the tax optimization and security. You think about all those things and you can determine what age you should actually draw Social Security. You got to evaluate your Medicare options before age 65 so you know what plan you're moving into. Look at long-term care insurance. So the other thing that people really stress out about in late retirement is long-term care. Whether that's a nursing home or whether that's in-home care, financing that can be very expensive. So there's kind of two ways to do it. You can use insurance, or you can, if your income is low enough, you can actually apply for Medicaid. Medicaid will pay a bunch of those long-term care expenses, but you need to evaluate, hey, do I have enough money where I can self-finance this? Do I need to buy a long-term care insurance plan? Or is my income low enough that Medicaid can actually handle long-term care? You finish off any of that estate planning that you started in early retirement. And then the one that most people are kind of blind to and don't think about is what happens when one of the two spouses passes away. So that survivor benefit changes the tax implications drastically in retirement. So when you're married, filing jointly, the tax brackets are much bigger. But when one spouse passes away, you go from married filing jointly to being a single filer. So now they still have all the same income coming in from the accounts with required minimum distributions, but they have much smaller tax brackets. So they end up pushing into higher tax brackets. More of their Social Security benefit becomes taxable. The Social Security benefit will actually be reduced because you aren't drawing Social Security from each of the two spouses. Because they're single now and not married, it's actually going to push them into higher IRMA surcharges on their Medicare. So they just end up paying a bunch more in fees and taxes when they transition from married to single in that later portion of retirement. So I threw a lot of information at you. So what's the big takeaway from this? I will actually leave a link down below so you can look at a paper that I put together summarizing everything that we've talked about today in this video. It will also give you a link to the back test showing you all the data across that 20 years. And the big takeaway is don't fixate on one number. It's two separate math problems that you need to solve. And once you have the solution to each of those math problems, then you just need to get the plan in place. And then once the plan is where it needs to be, you can go around some of the common mistakes people make in early retirement instead of diving headfirst and then scrambling in the first 2 to 3 years trying to figure out why you're losing so much money to taxes. And if you got something out of my video today, like the video, subscribe to the channel, because I'm going to be trying to make you 1% better every day. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time.
Understand the market, keep your vision on the prize, building up the wealth right in front of your eyes. Talk Higgins, yeah, we keep it moving. Talk Higgins, watch the wealth improving. Markets and the money, making sense of the math, helping you navigate the financial path. Talk Higgins, subscribe for the vision. Stay smart, stay invested. We out.